Master potter Bill Van Gilder has thrown about 300 tons of clay. From his studio in Frederick, Maryland, he ships upwards of 500 pieces of pottery a week.
A cup and saucer is not much more than a simple bowl and a shallow plate. They can be really formal looking or more informal like this one. And for this project, I'm going to show you a couple of new techniques. The saucer. We're going to create a well in the center of it. This is a place to seat the cup when the two of them are together. And this is important. This slope has to be at the right angle. When I remove my cup from my saucer, I don't want my spoon to fall into that well. Now the cup itself has a thrown handle on it. I'm going to show you how to do that off the hump. It's a really sturdy handle. I'm going to use this a lot in the kitchen, so it's got to be sturdy. First thing we've got to do is get our clay ready.
To make this project, you'll need 3 pounds 4 ounces of clay, an undercutting rib, a wooden rib, a soft rubber rib, a trimming tool, a ruler, wax-resist emulsion, a decorating brush, and 2 glazes.
I'm going to make my cup 5.5 inches across the top and 3.5 inches high. The first thing we do is get it opened. And I'm going to open it in a very rounded form inside. I'm also leaving the base a little more than 1/4 inch thick. Remember, I'm going to trim a foot in this base. And so I need to leave the clay there. And I'm ready to take my first measurement. Still a little bit short, but the diameter is great. So I'm going to slightly pull it up again.
Bill measures the dimensions of the cup again.
And that looks close enough. The last thing I'm going to do is use my undercutting rib. Now this straight edge on the outside is going to remove all the slit and give me a final shape. And I'm going to undercut down here at the foot. And the last thing I'm going to do is use my sponge and clean up this rim. And that's important. This is the part that touches your mouth. It's got to be smooth. And I've actually beveled the inside. And I'm going to use this tool to accent that even more. That forms an angled edge. And that makes it really easy to drink from. I'm going to lightly press this rib up against the inside rim and support it on the outside with a slightly damp finger.
Bill softens the rim one last time with a sponge.
You know, I don't want this edge to be too sharp. That means it's going to chip easily when you start using it in the kitchen.
Then he cuts the cup from the wheel head and carefully lifts it to the wear board with dry fingertips.
Okay, let's make the saucer next. Now lifting a low wide form off of a wheel head when it's really wet is kind of difficult. So I'm going to make the saucer on a bat. I'm going to trim a foot in this saucer up underneath. So I need to leave the base about 1/2 inch thick, maybe a little bit less than 1/2 inch. So we pull it out, and that's about as wide underneath as I want to make it. So the rest of this comes up into a saucer. I'm stretching the clay out, but I'm also supporting the rim out here with my fingers of this hand. Now a saucer to fit that cup should be about 8.5 inches across.
Determining the dimensions of pottery sets like this one takes experience. Bill's put tips on cup and saucer dimensions on DIYnetwork.com.
Now as this saucer gets wider and wider, I'm working very carefully, a very light touch and a very slow wheel speed.
When DIY's Throwing Clay continues, Bill makes the... Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Bill is making a soup cup and saucer. So far, he's thrown a simple cup with a beveled rim and an 8.5 inch saucer. Now he's going to put the finishing touches on the...
Now the well of the saucer, this little stepped indentation, that's a place to set the cup, keeps it from sliding around inside the saucer when it's in place. I'm going to use a soft edge, this little rounded soft point here of this wooden rib. I'm going to make this well 2.5 inches in diameter. So I just make a light mark and I take a measurement at this point. A little bit wider. I'm going to put a slight pressure on this rib, and it's going to create a step from the slope of the saucer into the well. And that step is going to be about 1/8 of an inch tall. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to clean that little edge up. Now there's one more thing to do on our saucer. I'm going to use the sharp tip of the rib and create a groove right inside the rim. I'm going to support the rim while I'm pushing down on it with the tool. Now this groove or this line at the rim has two functions. One, aesthetically, it finishes the edge of the saucer. And two, it provides a little step or a groove that your thumb can grasp when you're picking up the saucer and the cup loaded full of soup. So it's a functional detail that's important.
Bill cuts the saucer from the bat and removes the bat from the wheel head. Now he'll throw the handle for the cup.
I'm going to make this handle from a hump of clay. I'm going to use a 1-pound piece for that. I'm pulling up a short cylinder, and the walls of this cylinder are a little less than 1/4 of an inch thick. We don't want this handle to be too heavy. It'll pull the bowl out of shape when we fire it. Right about here is the bottom of this hole. I'm going to taper it in, relax, and then taper in again. I want a little handle that fits my hand, narrow here and thicker here. Okay, I'm going to put a final shaping using this soft rubber rib. I'm also going to remove the slit from the outside. I'm going to cut a groove at the base of my handle. With the wheel spinning slowly, put my wire in that groove and quickly pull it through. Okay, I've got dry fingertips and a dry tacky surface here, so I can just pick this up. And the fact that the handle is hollow is important. I'm going to push this end up against the cup, which will seal it. If I didn't have this hole at this end, I'd have a trapped air pocket inside the handle. When it got in the kiln, it would explode. So remember that.
Coming up next on DIY's Throwing Clay.
Okay, with these 3 pieces good and leather hard now, I'm going to trim a foot in the bottom of the cup and one in the bottom of the saucer too. I'm going to get my handle attached last. I'm going to trim both pieces, the saucer and the cup, on the same clay pad.
Bill throws the pad 9 inches wide so the saucer fits on it with room to spare.
A slight little tap pushes the cup into the center, and that's an acquired skill. It takes some practice, but it's worth learning. Now, the width of this foot is going to be 2 1/4 inches, just under 2 1/2. And why 2 1/2? Remember when we made the saucer, this measurement was 2 1/2, and the foot of this cup has to sit inside there at 2 1/4 inches. Now I've gotten rid of that thick clay at the top and slightly curved and smoothed the sides of the bowl a little bit.
Bill measures the base before trimming any more clay.
So I'm going to slightly indent here because I want a slight rise to this foot, about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, the next step is to cut out this center piece. Now I have my outside line right here, this outside edge. I'm going to move in 1/4 of an inch and make a line there. This area is what I'm carving away.
Bill softens the edge of the foot with his finger and burnishes the cup with a soft rubber rib to seal the surface.
Now this saucer, I let get a little stiffer than the cup. It means as I trim it and pick it up and put it on the pad, I'm not going to warp it.
Bill re-rounds the clay pad. He also makes a few lines to help him center the saucer and pulls a keyhole so it's easy to lift the trimmed saucer from the pad.
Now, the width of this saucer, the outside diameter, was 8 1/2 inches. I'm going to trim a foot that's about 4 1/2 inches, or about half that total width. Okay, I've just started to define the foot rise right here. I'm going to take a measurement. Good. I'm going to remove this inside part. Again, move in 1/4 inch and mark it. And cut from center to 3 o'clock.
With a ruler, Bill checks to see that he's removed enough clay from the center.
I want to make sure that this point is below the level of my foot ring. Otherwise, it would rock and roll, or what we call a spinner. I'm going to smooth it with my fingertip, a little bit of burnishing. cup fits nicely into the saucer with just a little bit of play.
To attach the handle more smoothly and securely to the cup, Bill soaks the end in water first to soften it up.
And while it's softening, I'm going to push it in this direction. Why am I doing that? When I attach it to the cup, that upward thrust makes sure that my fingers can get underneath the handle and they're not going to bump into the saucer. I'm going to wet that surface one more time. I'm just going to carefully push the edge of the handle down onto the cup. I'm going to support it inside with my fingertips as I push the handle tight to the side of the cup. I'm going to use a little bit of water on my thumb and just push on the edge of the handle until it connects solidly with the cup. So wipe away that excess at the top. Now I'm going to use a sponge and just smooth that joint a little bit. I like to see this seam. It again shows how the pot is made. Make sure it's round. Okay, there's a finished cup and saucer. It's quite big, isn't it?
When the set was bone dry, he loaded it into the kiln. Next on DIY's Throwing Clay, a trip.
I'm going to use a raspberry red glaze on my cup and saucer, inside and out. I'm then going to do some wax resist decoration on the outside of the cup. Get kind of loose here a little bit. I'm then going to overglaze that area with this nutmeg glaze. I learned something by running some glaze tests. When I dip the nutmeg over the red, I get this cream color. I quite like it.
Before glazing, Bill waxes the bottom of the cup and saucer. He also waxes the saucer's well. Exposing the clay in the well instead of glazing it will hold the cup more firmly in place on the saucer.
Okay, while these dry, I'm going to stir up my glazes.
Bill dips the saucer and cup in raspberry red.
Inside this cup is a patch of mist glaze. I've got to patch that up before I go further. I'm going to use a soft brush. Now what that tells me, next cup that I dip, turn it around in the glaze a bit more and swirl it around. That'll keep that from happening again.
Bill fettles the base of the cup, the well, and the foot of the saucer. Now he's ready to apply the wax resist decoration.
I'm going to wax this foot area again over the raspberry red. That's going to create this hard red line. I'm also going to do the same thing at the rim. I'm going to do some kind of loose brush decoration. You can do any pattern you like here. I'm just going to put some X's and O's on it. Now I need a couple of O's, and I'm going to get that by dipping my finger into the wax and just touching the cup. You know, this decoration, it's kind of random. It's a very organized project otherwise. A little bit of looseness can help. Let me get my nutmeg glaze ready. Hold it inside and spread my hand and go in as straight as I can. I want some of this yellow down onto the rim of this saucer. So I'm going to paint that on. I'm going to have to put a few coats on because a brush applies glaze much thinner than if you dip it. Now I'm going to fire my cup sitting in my saucer. Makes good use of the kiln space. So let's put it in the kiln, see what we get.
Bill threw the handle for this cup on the wheel. Instead, he could have used a clay extruder to make a handle blank to attach to the cup. Clay extruders are used for a variety of projects. They're a great addition to any potter's studio and can broaden the range of pottery pieces you can make. Bill Shin, a former teacher and potter for over 35 years, talks about this versatile tool at a clay conference in Baltimore, Maryland.
People tell me that this is a lot like using the old childhood Play-Doh machine, squeezing the clay out, only this is on a much bigger scale. This is a power-driven extruder, driven with air. Early extruders, and many of them now, are driven by manpower. This is operated with a foot pedal down below, Now this makes it really easy because with the foot pedal, I'm free with my hands now to actually form the shape as it comes out. Here's an example of a die. It is forced up into place right here, and then we hold it with these C-clamps, which come with most extruders. The wood, incidentally, is very good, strong Danish marine plywood, and it's very important. And now we'll throw some more clay in. The clay actually goes over and around, remixes, and comes out in a perfect tube. And of course, it's handy for making cylindrical forms and square forms. Traditionally, that's what it is. A lot of potters use it for pulling handles. There's a lot of creative possibilities in it, and in making your own dies. You can make dies out of any material. You can make it out of wood, plastic, metal. I prefer wood. This is an example of starting out a form here. I then drill holes, and the double line would all be removed. The mistakes I made was initially using inexpensive wood and not bracing it well. I had to learn how to use the proper bracing. U-bolts are terrible because they're so weak.
Constructing custom dies correctly is essential if you want them to work well. Bill's put tips on making sturdy dies on DIYnetwork.com.
An extruder is about the only way you could have this conforming shape, you know, this constant shape. You can make virtually anything. You make teapots. I've made trains. You can use different colored clays. Putting one ball of colored clay after the other, it extrudes beautifully marbled clay out the bottom. Haven't done that in a long time, but it is really nice. Another thing which is convenient for a potter is to throw the biggest pots they've ever thrown before. What they do is they extrude a very tall cylinder, place the cylinder on the wheel. They start out with a nice tall cylinder, and they immediately puff it into any shape they want. That's an area too. It's kind of exciting. And this is a great way to work, and it's fun, and there's so many possibilities.
It's the excitement and endless possibilities that keep potters like Bill Shin and Bill Van Gilder exploring new forms, as well as recreating classic shapes, like this oversized soup cup and saucer.
When I made my soup cups and saucers, I used a clay with a little bit of aggregate in it, or sand, and that gives them some thermal protection. So not only can I use them in the dishwasher, but I can also use them in the microwave and the oven too. I'm Bill Van Gilder. Have a great time in the studio.